How are all these investors accumulating all these properties and making millions? That's what we're here to answer. How are these people making so much money and not investing much of their own? Today we're talking about subject to, and if you get this, it's because I probably sent you a subject to property and you might be wondering what subject to is, and I'm just here to explain it today because it's an interesting and unique opportunity. The idea of a subject to is to accumulate some property with having minimal amount down. And by minimal, that's a subjective term because sometimes, in this last one I was pitching, it was $160,000 down, but you're getting a $264,000 loan on a property that's worth $465 plus. So overall, you're getting $40,000 in equity, but the biggest thing you're accumulating in this deal is the low interest rate, which happens to be 2.75 on that specific deal. So why is that so important? Investors, with $1 million, you can either buy two properties, like two $500,000 properties, or you could potentially go for 4 or 5 or more, or 6 or 7, and then have a mortgage on those, correct? Well, now you're extending yourself, you're leveraging yourself, and that's not always necessarily the case. Sometimes people need to get rid of their properties, and reinstating the loan, if somebody pays back the backlogs due to the bank and you can reinstate the loan, you can acquire the loan. And how do you do that? Well, assignment is one way, but we don't like to do assignment because then you are taking the loan entirely and then you're still leveraging yourself. So what happens is, like in this last particular case, he was foreclosing. Okay, he needed to get out. He was late a couple years. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, because when you're late, it's compounding. And not only do you have the regular interest, you got 5% on top, or 6%, or whatever your loan says on top of that. And that compounding interest is what cripples people, because you can't catch up to it after a few months. You better come up with the full amount or negotiate out or see if they'll put it at the back end of the loan or something, but you're not getting yourself out. So these people need to sell. And so we look for investors to basically assume the loan, but without assuming the loan, it's called subject to. So you're subject to the loan. You'll be signing a contract that says you are operating within the means of the loan that the person signed on. That person's always going to be on the loan. So right now, that person typically hasn't been paying for a couple of years. They have terrible credit, horrible. They're probably on the verge of bankruptcy, if not already filed or whatever. You're taking that loan. You get that 2.75%, which is hedging inflation. So these type of properties, you're probably going to keep 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe only 2 before you refinance out or sell it or whatever you're going to do to it and get your equity out. So when you have a 2.75% rate, it is hedging inflation, because inflation is about 3%. And so you are beating inflation by borrowing money. And that is how you leverage to get more. It's how most investors got to where they're at with a lot of properties, is by leveraging not their own money, but other people's money. What does that seller get out of it? Okay, well, the seller actually, gets all their basically debt forgiven. It's not really forgiven. You're paying it off. Okay. That's what that $160,000 is for, is to pay off what they owe and reinstate the loan. So they're getting out scot-free. In addition, I work into that $160,000 a little bit for the sellers to start their life. And a lot of it has to do with how much we can negotiate in with how much we're negotiating with the bank and how much we can get away with. But when you have a rental and the PITI, like in this last example, is about $1,150, and rent in that area is $2,500 plus in a private gated community, golf course community, it's pretty unbelievable the opportunity available. So a subject to is you are filling out a form. You're signing a form that we filled out and had our lawyers write. And you are taking responsibility of that property. You get the note. You get the deed, the note, the title. It is yours. You are actually on there. You're taking responsibility. They are still on the loan. The nice thing about them is, yeah, we're paying them off. We're basically equalizing their debt. But in addition, as you make payments, you're actually increasing their credit. So it's not increasing yours. If that's something that you were hoping that would happen in this deal, it's not. You are helping their credit. However, you're accumulating a property. And in 3, 4, 5 years, as that property increases in value, on a standard market, it's 8%. We've seen some crazy stuff over the last 2-3 years, but standard market, 8% increase and about 3% on the interest, on the inflation. So on that, you are winning just by keeping somebody in the house, right? That's how you leverage money. You have a small payment, a PITI of $1,150. You make $2,500 plus, we'll say $2,500 because that's a conservative number. And you get to pocket that money and build equity down the road. So that is subject to properties, and it is a unique opportunity for people, and people have been doing it since the 80s, and it's basically allowed a lot of people that didn't have much money or assets to leverage other people's money, help them out, and make money in the process. And it's something that Jessica and I are continuing to learn more about. It's a very unique opportunity, and when it works out, subject to is the way to go. In that last example, could I have wholesaled that property? Yes, I could have, but it would have been quite a bit less. We would have had to be around the $400,000 for an investor or less, and at that cost, the seller wouldn't have gotten any money. The interest rate would have been lost. It would have been bought up. And when you have an interest rate at 2.75, I would hate for that thing to disappear, because that is working against the banks, which we love. And it's working for you. Taking on that note is probably more important than wholesaling and getting a property for less expensive when you're only making a finite amount. Yes, this is over time, and you have to build it into your portfolio, but you're only paying $160,000. So you can get in on 6 properties, 6 subject twos, versus paying cash for 2 properties, right? And yes, you're going to have loans and stuff, and it'll be different. But in 5 years, you will have made a lot more from those subject 2 properties than you will have from the ones you purchased from cash. Okay, so is it illegal? Absolutely not. Like I said, they've been doing it since the 1980s. And when I first learned about it, I said, how can you acquire somebody else's loan? Don't you have to assign it? Actually do assignment paperwork to assign the loan over? That's not necessarily true. Actually, it's somewhat illegal for them to write that in the paperwork. Now, can they revoke the loan at any time? Yes. So as an investor, I think it's 1% over the first year get revoked, and you have to figure out and refi or sell at that point. The nice thing about this last deal is you'd be getting it for about $436, and it's $465 on the conservative end. And so you should be able to at least get your money back out or refi into a good position. But either way, a 99% chance of keeping a 2.75% interest rate is well worth it. And this is how people are making so much money. It's how Jessica and I are going to start acquiring properties subject to at the right times. And if you have the money to invest on such a low interest rate, you're making money that way. And this is pretty much what subject to is. There's a whole lot of little fine details in between there, but that is the gist of what subject to is. And I want you to know that it's for people who are looking to stay on the property for a couple of years at least. It only makes sense if really it makes sense to have it for 5 to 7 years. If you have any questions, we'd love to help you out. Just get a hold of us.